Hi, warm welcome back to the channel. I've had a specific request to talk about sanctions and filing for sanctions, as the phrase goes. Now, whilst I'm not a US lawyer, I do understand sanctions and what they mean. So I will talk a little bit about what they mean and give you an example that I found in the unsealed documents here, because there's quite a stark example from Johnny Depp's lawyers against Amber Heard's lawyers for breach, they say, of an order. So I'm going to bring one of those up for you and take you through that. But just before I do that, sanctions generally a court can either apply of its own motion, or it can be applied in response to a filing of a motion for sanctions by one of the lawyers for either side. So a court could apply either fees that the lawyer who is sanctioned has to pay, or the court can exclude evidence, or the court can make an order preventing that party or their lawyers from referring to certain material or making certain arguments in the future, depending on what the motion is and what action and motion is sought. So turning to this example that I have here. So here you can see this motion filed pursuant to Rule 412 of the Rules of the Supreme Court of Virginia, moving the court for sanctions against Amber Heard for violating a stipulated amended protective order. An amended protective order is essentially just an order that means that certain material is supposed to be confidential, filed under seal, and not referred to without the court's permission. In support of this motion, there is a memorandum. We often refer to this as evidence in support. In the US, it's referred to as a memorandum in support of such a motion. So in this, as I said, referring specifically to this protective order and at the court's directive at the pre-trial conference that the parties and their counsel do nothing to taint the jury pool. And as such, as it says here, as set forth below, arguing within this motion that the defendant's violations of this protective order and the court's directive have severely prejudiced Johnny Depp and almost certainly tainted the jury pool. Now, moving on to the arguments, first of all, that there's protective information. So certain false allegations, which you can read here, were protected information under this protected order. And this argues that Amber Heard's counsel knows that the highly sensitive allegations by her were indisputably protected information under the protective order. And indeed, the stipulated protective order entered specifically addresses the SA allegations that were directed by the UK court to be sealed and agreed by the parties to this action that they should be maintained under seal as specified within that order. Now, many of you will remember that I've referred to the confidential annex to the judgment of the UK trial, which I have not referenced because part of proceedings within England and Wales, there is no further order of the court to unseal that confidential annex to the judgment, so I've not referred to it. It goes on to argue that for Amber Heard and her counsel to maintain otherwise is untenable and absurd. So in other words, this information is protected information and thus protected under the protective order. In other words, it shouldn't be revealed, it should be sealed and protected from the jury's eye. Under argument 2, it shows that the defendant, Amber Heard, violated the notice requirements in paragraph 12 of the protective order. Notice is simply giving another party notice of what you're going to do. And this memorandum sets out arguments that Amber Heard's counsel violated paragraph 12 in at least 3 material respects. First of all, 5 references to the allegations did not relate directly to the subject matter of that hearing. Secondly, she gave no prior notice to the court. And thirdly, she gave no prior notice to Depp's counsel, who therefore had no opportunity to object to it being used, which they certainly would have done. It says whether Brederhoff knew that a reporter was in the room is a total non sequitur. In other words, an argument that does not follow. What matters is that she knowingly violated each of the 3 threshold criteria in the protective order for disclosing protected information and that it resulted in serious harm to Depp. The precise harm those provisions and the protective order as a whole were designed to prevent. And Miss Heard and her counsel knew that the whole purpose of amending the original protective order was to protect these precise allegations, which are the most scandalous and prejudicial. Moving on to the third argument, Elaine Brederhoff's purposeful references to Amber Heard's false and outrageous allegations violate the protective order and the court's directive not to taint the jury pool. And again, as the court will recall, it says the sole purpose of that hearing was for the court to ascertain the parties' position whether a pool camera should be permitted at trial. In other words, not to argue each of these issues. So to bring those in was to violate that protective order. Moving on to the fourth argument, the Courthouse News Service immediately reported that she repeated disclosures of this protected scandalous allegations. And within only a few hours of the hearing, the Courthouse News Service had blasted the headline, "Attorneys say that she was during the relationship with Depp." Obviously, I'm not reading out every word of it, otherwise YouTube blocks this video. The fifth argument, that her violations severely prejudiced Johnny Depp. By violating the protective order and the court directive, it's caused the most explosive protected information to be published into the jury pool, thereby tainting it. The sixth argument, that the court should take away Amber's 5 preemptory strikes and impose monetary sanctions. And in the form of those sanctions, this motion asks the court to take away these preemptory strikes, bar her from mentioning or introducing any evidence in respect of these claims against Johnny Depp at trial, impose sanctions of $25,000 to reimburse Johnny Depp for having to litigate the defendant's multiple violations, and any order or further relief that the court deems appropriate, which is a common thing for the motions to ask for. So I just thought this would be a useful and an interesting example of filing for sanctions and what they might be for. So I hope you found that review useful. Please do like the video and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.